Top 10 craft instructions. How do I get depressed? If you know me here on this YouTube channel, you also know that I love the absurd. And today I'm giving you instructions on how you can really actively become depressed. This may sound absurd, but by following these instructions, you will of course also have the blueprint for your depression in your hands. And it's clear that if it works in one direction, like you can actively make yourself depressed, you also know that if you do the opposite, you can get rid of it like that. So today, with a bit of an absurd joke, I'm giving you my top 10 ways to actively become depressed. Tip 1 goes something along these lines. Absolutely mess up your brain. Get your brain right. Here too it's broken in bulk. And for that you essentially don't need a lot of seafood. So you don't even have to drink alcohol. It's enough if you have a lot of sweet stuff, i.e. with a lot of sugar and with white flour. Of course, you've killed two birds with one stone when you have a sugary white flour croissant, which is perhaps covered with a sugary chocolate glaze. Once you've eaten about 10 pieces, see if you're still able to think clearly. And then pay attention to the fact that when this insulin level drops, how your mood immediately goes down and you feel pretty unusual, and then of course it's time for the next croissant. Overall, this is also a nice aging boost for your body, so that you increasingly feel empowered to solve problems in life. Listening becomes slower and slower. Your mime goes down a bit. Your body feels more like potatoes. You feel even more like shit. That was tip 1. Then mess it up with lots of sugar and white flour. Tip 2. Always focus entirely on the problem. So, for example, if you're heartbroken, focus every day on the fact that it was most likely your fault, that you suck, and that you're guaranteed to never find someone again. Of course, it's mean if I tell you the opposite. I got the trick from old monasticism. Don't waste so much time on the problem, because it's clear you might get abandoned, but use all the remaining energy you have to look for solutions. Sure, the feelings have to come out, they take time, but the strength you have will take good care of you. Concentrate as soon as a thought comes. I'm shit. I'll never find anyone again. Concentrate on the sentence almost like a mantra. I am beautiful. My life can only get better now, and soon I will have my new, real love. So that was tip 2. If you have a problem, be sure to focus on the problem and not look around for a solution. Tip 3 is also really good. This is based on the fact that we have mirror neurons and they record the surrounding information. Of course, we learn in school, we only learn through text. That's the most boring form. You don't learn very well there. Learning through imitation is more dangerous, and learning is even more dangerous. I also like to call this voter relationship. When you're in a group of people having fun, it infects you. You don't even have to look at their faces or listen to them. It's the atmosphere in the room. And that's exactly what the tip is based on. Tip 3, be sure to surround yourself with other depressed people. For example, with people who are even worse off and who you are now, trying to help with your remaining strength. And you know that when someone tries to help you, you show them that they don't really understand you and that nobody can actually help you. You will have the same experiences now. So tip 3 works really well. Be sure to surround yourself with other depressed, avoidant people. You can always say that they are far too superficial. They don't even know what life is about and how wonderful suffering can be. So in a similar vein, I also count this as tip 3. Read literature by people who have to deal with very difficult problems. Of course, if you now fit into group 2, if you are already depressed, read stories of children who have lost their parents, of cancer patients who are on the verge of death. Now deal with the problems of the world, then you can really shit again. This gives us a nice transition to tip 4. Watch the news with very threatening reports, crises, disasters, idiots. Yes, if you want to have fun, just look at the news. If there's anything like that on the internet from maybe 1970 or 1980, I was already depressed enough back then, and it ruined my youth because back then the news gave me back, based on expert opinions, said that we have acid rain and that all the forests would die. That was expert opinion, which I based on science, of course. It got me down. I was almost exclusively concerned with acid rain, and at that time it was spread instead of global warming, global cooling, that we were heading towards a new ice age. I also believed, and above I picked out airplane disasters purely from the news, and that was my focus, ruining the rest of the day, and of course the nuclear weather situation. We've always practiced at school. What do we do if the atomic bomb falls? Put your school bag on the back of your head, bend down flat behind a piece of stone. So this form of news was in addition to my depressed family. That really gave me a kick, so I can recommend you from experience that you just don't go to happy movies. Don't watch anything funny, avoidant people. But now also watch news programs, feature programs, additional programs about trouble spots in the world. Don't concentrate on the blackbeard and the blossoming cherry tree in the street where you might be walking now, because that would make you too happy. There are always problems, and news programs always provide supplies. Yes, tip 5. I also think it's great, and it's also proven organically in the brain. Do multitasking. If you do multitasking, you definitely avoid feelings of happiness. A feeling of happiness arises when you concentrate entirely on something you love. Then even your brain frequency increases, and body, soul, spirit are like a well-tuned triad. So you're in a good mood when you concentrate on one thing. So you definitely have to avoid that. Do multitasking instead. Do 5 to 10 things at once. This is proven. Multitasking isn't actually possible. Instead, you break the flow by jumping between different things, and this has also been proven by research. Your error rate increases, which is wonderfully frustrating. Multitasking is a lie. You won't become more effective at all by having 10 windows open at once and switching back and forth between them or between the novel. And read text messages at the same time and then run into the kitchen again or something. As you multitask, your brain also continues to deteriorate. And if you know at the core that depression is essentially slowed neuron growth, or neuron growth that has come to a standstill, you of course have to do everything you can to strive for or maintain this standstill. You have to fight for it, because it has even been proven that Alzheimer's is now reversible. So if you cut out sugar, the brain creates new neurons again. If you move a lot in the fresh air, if you eat greens, like green smoothies, wild herbs, and maybe even start with concentration exercises. So you absolutely have to avoid, like the plague, if you want to stay depressed, multitask. Now we have a nice list. So imagine this is now an interim summary, because if you are really depressed, your brain is already mush. So you get an interim summary so that you don't miss anything good here. Summary 1.5. So now we have the overall picture for you. You are now in the wonderfully depressed circle of friends, perhaps trying to stop others from becoming suicidal. You watch a lot of news every day, have the radio on at the same time, do multitasking, and always have delicious croissants with a thick sugar crust. Tip 6. Yes, and the rest of the social environment is also very suitable. Be sure to always compare yourself with other people. In doing so, you destroy your self-worth and your sense of uniqueness, because if you were proud of yourself and loved yourself, the depression would be over again. So, let's avoid anything that makes you feel unique and special. Would be too easy. The fingerprint is already unique. Otherwise, the police wouldn't be so after you, and you are unique in the way you are in the world. We have to put an end to this now, because we want you to stay depressed. So, for example, if you are small and petite, I am 1.83, and I was always totally jealous of the small and petite ones, because they have such a good sense of balance. They never fell off the balance beam like that. They were great at gymnastics, they were great on the horse, they can balance really well. And I used to like cycling. When it was uphill, these mountain fleas were super fast. Not anymore. So when you're short, always compare yourself to tall people. See yourself as an ugly dwarf who is too short. Shame on you. You must now be convinced that you absolutely have to make up for it. And that's the end of your uniqueness and the advantages of being small. Of course, I can tell you from my point of view that as a 1.83 girl, that was still quite rare in my time, and my mother found it extremely ugly. I am, of course, always went extra crooked and was then dissed by others for it. Of course, I was also ashamed that I now stood out, but as I said, if you're little, we'll get to you too. So always compare yourself to the big ones. Always look at what you don't have instead of being proud of your unique potential. So if you're a specialist, compare yourself to a completely different specialist and beat yourself to the head and punish yourself for not being the specialist. Yes, the next tip fits that. That's beautiful too. Tip 7. Always focus on what others think about you. This will destroy your uniqueness again. So if you are now proud that you can bake cakes, so nice sweet stuff with white flour is best. And then someone comes along and says, all people who bake cakes are idiots. Then by all means adopt their opinion. And yes, you have another dirty afternoon. Or if you can do cartwheels well. And now a movement idiot like me comes along who can swim well, because I was never able to coordinate my large body well as a teenager. Or if you can dance well. If I say now, yes, dancing is so stupid. Life is about swimming. Definitely take this seriously. So let go of your joy, take over a foreign evaluation. This also gives you a basic principle of school. Of course, you can also really actively use school to become super depressed. She gives you grades all the time, even in subjects you don't give a shit about. So let go of the self-judgment that says you've never been interested in sports or math or English, and take the teacher's assessment instead. You really take it to heart when they give you a 5 instead of being proud of you for resisting learning boring stuff. And so at the end of school life, you can really have a deep hole in your heart and feel like you're full of shit. So be sure to keep track of the teacher's ratings. From now on, it is clear that you are not intelligent and stupid. If you stood up for yourself and said that 100 people liked the school, it wouldn't have achieved anything. Then you would have self-worth again. But we want to avoid that. You have another way to become depressed. It's about the championship now. Who gets depressed the quickest? You can also hold competitions in your depressed circle of friends. Tip 8. Be heartless to yourself and consider everyone else important, only you unimportant, that you always come last. I can tell you a wonderful dream from my time of depression. What does dream mean? That was a whole series. Of course, I also behaved completely according to the rules. And I'm even better than you. I'm almost born depressed. I didn't even have to be taught the rules. I'm almost like the inventor of this rule. That's how well I mastered it. To the following point, treat yourself heartlessly and always put yourself last. Mine, one of my nice dream series, was about there being a big buffet in the dream. It's clear that when we're depressed, we really like to eat, because we always come up short. And we compensate for a lot of things with food, but also an end to it. So in the dream, the big buffet was super full, supreme delicacies, also sugary things. And every time it was my turn, which was a very long one, the thing was empty. Cho. Of course it had nothing to do with me putting myself last. It's pure fate. I am the victim. It's clear. Wasn't entirely serious. But you know that. Well, and of course you can also apply this as a rule in everyday life. Always give to others. Let your projects wither. And the spiritual principle applies. What I pay attention to will flourish. And where I don't direct attention, that will wither and die. And so we have another great recipe. Give yourself more attention than you, including other people's projects, and they will flourish and you will wither. Wonderful example of telling a friend who is also depressed. Let's take it from your large depressed circle of friends so that nothing changes. And that you're now cleaning all the windows while you can't look out of the windows at home. Then you have another beautiful foggy day, and at some point you are so depressed that you no longer feel like pulling up the blinds in the morning, and then we have success again. Tip 9. Be sure to be critical of yourself when it comes to this point. So, even when you have success, people nag at you. Others can also provide you with great help, so if you accidentally deliver a great project just because you loved it, and 99 people will praise you, but one will say, well, you overlooked a very important thing, or I still think it's shit. I don't believe in it. Then forget the 99 who praised you and only think about the critic for the next few weeks, because otherwise you wouldn't be depressed anymore. So I did really well too. For me, my lovely mom was always the critic. When I came home proud with something because the others had praised me, they always complained about it and I was down again. So my mom's recipe for success, an old home recipe from a depressed household, so to speak. It works. Tip 10. The next tip also goes in this direction. Be sure to strive for perfection. So that means you have to hate yourself until you are perfect. This is another sweet tip from the devil, because I'm going to the beach here. So what do you mean I'm going to the beach? I'm sitting there now, and now let's look at mussels. So now we have a lot of mussels here. I'll pick some up and see how sharp the camera gets them. And now we have lots of different shells here. Well, this one is more like black. Now we have these here. Now we have this one and this one. What I want to show you is that each of these shells is unique. Now tell me from nature, which of the many shells is the perfect shell? So perfection means I'm now inventing a standard, which of course doesn't come from you. So if you were a brown mussel now, such a brown mussel, of course I would declare a black mussel to be perfect. This is the perfect one. And you are the brown shell. And that makes it clear you are imperfect. So now you realize what trick the devil uses to keep you depressed. So be sure to use this tip. Firstly, we have the comparison here, and then be sure to use a scale that doesn't suit you. Conversely, you could of course also conclude from this. Life simply consists of diversity, of many variants, and life doesn't give a shit about perfection. It is simply the living thing. Everything is in the river. Everything grows. Everything is diverse. And you are part of this symphony. Yeah. But we don't want to take that too seriously because we want to keep you depressed. So if you strive for perfection, you will realize that as long as you are alive, you are never perfect. Or once you are perfect because you realize some artificial standard, you quickly fall because you are still developing. Yes, that could be enough in itself. And of course I was such a perfectionist and put a lot of exam pressure on myself, and stress works great to stay depressed. So when I almost finished an essay, for me it's also about writing scientific texts. Of course I strived for perfection, which led to certain writing paralysis, so that I could only torture myself at my desk with, for example, 4 bars of chocolate a day. And when the deadline approached, I couldn't submit the text because I felt it was incomplete. Afterwards, no one was interested, which really annoyed me. Yes, it was just a text, one of many. But I had a wonderful hell before I handed the thing in. I actually enjoyed writing texts, but this urge for perfection ruined my enjoyment of writing. And that is the goal. We don't want to have joy. We don't want to be happy. We want to be depressed. Because otherwise we might lose our depressed circle of friends. Another tip. When I was working on this top 10, I asked my circle of friends who were still depressed about what they thought were the best ways to become or stay depressed. They really liked the idea that I would now like to give you tips on YouTube on how to lead when depressed. Bonus tip 11, and one tip from them was to avoid leisure. because imagine you have free time. So now you're sitting here on the beach like me. Yes, what is happening there? Your brain regenerates, you recover, the sun shines, there is no one you have to save. Yes, you get in a good mood. That doesn't work. You might start playing with shells or running or getting creative or getting to know other people who are not depressed and who are in a good mood. Then the depression is screwed. We want to avoid that. If you avoid it, you'll never get into real burnout. And maybe you'll soon be an ex-depressive. So constantly look for overload, constantly look for big projects. And when one project is over, start the next one straight away. But we also agreed that it would be best to multitask. Because otherwise you might even find fun in a project if you really concentrate on it. When you get into the flow, avoid having to. Then, yes, they are no longer the Oberdingers. That's something in the direction of cruelty towards yourself. Bonus tip 12. Don't forgive yourself for mistakes. So don't apologize. Still dwell on the mistakes that your grandma and your mother and your brother may have held against you from your childhood. That maybe you once lost your little brother's teddy bear, or that because you didn't feed the cat regularly, the animals got distemper. Always remember your past mistakes. And of course, you can increase the whole thing if you get a life partner who likes to blame others, so that you really take this guilt problem into your love relationship. So find someone who is totally comfortable saying, it's your fault. Don't forgive yourself for your mistakes. And look for someone who always says, it's your fault. Class system. You'll stay in your depressed fart and won't see the morning light. Great tip again. Bonus tip 13. Also a good thing. That's a bit tricky. This is what meditators and people have found out. This is based on when you, fully awake, simply perceive everything that is there here and now. All this abundance, the sun, the sea, the waves. Each of these wooden groins is different. The sky, the rhythm, a lonely wanderer who maybe collects something, a story that is now forming in your head while you see what he collects. Yes, you definitely have to avoid that, because then you won't be depressed anymore. The depressive necessarily lives in the past and in the future, but avoid this unique moment like the plague. Just don't see what's happening here and now. This destroys your old patterns. In the here and now, it is always full of new impulses. Your brain wakes up. You're coming to life. You're amazed again. You become curious like a child, and life starts to be fun. That must not be. So instead of paying attention to things like that, dwell on the past, old pain. Encapsulate yourself, so to speak. And if you always dwell on the past, that your mom never loved you, that your dad never had time for you, that you were bad at school, then use that to worry about tomorrow now, even if you're sitting by the sea, for example. So deal with the past, and if this was really nice shit, then the logical conclusion is that the future will be shit too. Then you can start worrying about the future now. That's a really good tip. Summary. Avoid the current eye path. Live more in thoughts, and not so much in a perception of what is happening here and now. Final tip. That was already reflected in other things. Totally overload yourself. Really like that until you're so completely bent over. Your face is so smoochy and you can't really look out of your eyes anymore. Only when you really have dark circles under your eyes and wrinkles and shit, and you don't feel like looking at yourself in the mirror anymore, because then you would accidentally feel sorry for yourself. Yes, then you've done it. Totally overload yourself. That has to be your goal vision, to lead the shit and look like shit, so that you are committing suicide in installments just by working. Sleep disorders are then wonderfully inevitable, and if you're overloaded, you'll increasingly make mistakes, and you'll be really grumpy even with friends, simply because you know how shit works. And that is our goal. I hope you enjoy this baking recipe for depression, and if you liked it, you can give the video a like. And what would also be fun for me is if you wrote in that this totally sucks, because then you could be one of the other 99 people that we liked and I could concentrate on that. Have fun in life, or I wish you a wonderful